So to get started, I'm going to tell everybody. So I'm Zakia, everyone, but with me, I have the amazing Cleo Anderson, the founder and creator of the Glycerin Soap Base Makers group right on Facebook. And there's so much more to her as well. But Cleo, can you tell people just a little bit about who you are and most importantly, how you got started making soap?
Okay, so most importantly, I am Cleo Anderson. People call me Miss Cleo. And I am the owner of Arsenia Blue Beauty and soon to be Biblical Scents. And I have been making soap now since February 19th, 2004. And it started because in August of that previous year, I had a brand new 10-pound baby girl. She cried up to 2 hours after you would give her a bath every single day. And so I went, to the stores trying everything you could find for babies, at the store. And I would try to sneak them in the water behind her back. I would try to give her a, a sponge bath, whatever. She was screaming her head off. And when her hands could get to her face was actually shredded and bleeding. And so I was married at the time, and her dad said, you need to make her something. And I said, how am I going to make her something? He said, well, you need to help her. I said, how am I going to help her? And he said, your hands are blessed. And he said, make it. He said, do your research. At that time, we had dial-up internet. So he said, I'll get high-speed internet and you do your research and make it. And so from the time I made my very first bar of soap, she didn't cry. And I started with unscented, because I thought maybe it was fragrances. It wasn't the fragrance. I don't know what it was. And so I went back to my favorite baby stuff, which was Baby Magic, in the little yellow bottle.
Yes.
Screaming her head off. So back again to my soap. She didn't cry. So from that point, I went to try some sort of a fragrance. And so I bought some fragrance oils and some essential oils. And now don't forget, she's 5 months old. So I put it up to her nose and I waited for her to make an expression. So she said, and it happened to be Plumeria fragrance oil.
Wow.
So I put some fragrance oil in there, and she didn't cry. I went on to lotion, and even lotion used to make this baby scream her head off. So I went on to unscented lotion, taught myself how to make that. She didn't cry. Put Plumeria in it. She didn't cry. And so we were on after that.
Wow. So you had a 5-month-old as your original product tester. And then with the that sound and that display from her probably was like, check, check, check. What is that thing over there that I have ever used? I'll never, ever use that again. No need to.
Right. Yeah. We stopped buying everything. We only went for what I made. And so, I had, like I said, a husband with crazy skin and the itchies and the scratchies, and our water used to just make us itch and scratch while you're taking a shower. And so the strange thing was, once we started using the same soap I was making for the baby, you could take a shower and the hard water would not irritate anymore.
Yeah.
So all of his little skin rash things went away. I actually have 2 more daughters. And so my one oldest daughter at the time was 14. And she had fallen on the floor going into the bathroom and got a scratch on her leg. You know how you get separate from the carpet to like linoleum? And in our apartment at the time had the little strip of metal with the 2 screws. It scratched her leg, and all of a sudden this rash within a couple of weeks came up. Using my soap, it went away and never came back. Yes.
See, that's the kind of testimonials, like when you know that it works for your family, you have no problem telling somebody and sitting there and saying, you need to try this soap. You need to try this.
Absolutely.
Soap. So,
Absolutely.
so I imagine that was not a melt and pour from scratch. So what did you start with?
No.
Did you start with cold process or
Cold
hot process?
process soap.
Okay.
Because in that time during 2004, nobody knew how to use Facebook. It was brand new. And then actually in 2004, YouTube probably had less than 100 users. It was
Oh,
very
wow.
new. So yes. And then I'm from a small town in Northern California. And so in our local library and also in the local colleges and their libraries, there was no books on soap making. And
Oh,
so, yeah, it just was the internet research and only pictures of soap this one lady was making, which came from millersoap.com. And it was Kathy Miller. And so I read every page of this. And I
and you
began to make cold process soaps.
and you extensively tell us start with your research, and you often will
Oh,
refer us to millersoap.com. And I don't think they still
absolutely.
update it, but that content is still relevant today. Would you say that's
Right.
true?
She doesn't go in there that much to update that content, but when you say it's still relevant, it is absolutely relevant because there is hundreds of people that have contributed to the posts in there.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's one of the best, if not for me, the best,
Okay.
thorough website that you can learn from to learn how to make soap. It's an excellent place for a beginner to start. I know people always send you to Brambleberry, but this is before Brambleberry. You
Okay.
know what I mean?
Right.
And so I love this lady's, her soaps were beautiful. But the knowledge that she shared and the people in there, if you ever go to this website to read up on it, you will see people that are now writing books that are very quite well known.
Mm-hmm.
They were beginners on this website.
On that site. Awesome. Awesome. And you know what I like about that site? The fact that you're mentioning that it was a collective of
It
people.
was.
So it was constant, okay, this is what I tried. And hey, have you
Mm-hmm.
tried this? Can you try this in
Uh-huh.
there? And I think a lot of that still exists in the soaping community today. Not as much
Right.
as it was then, but definitely back then because there were no big videos that you could watch or the millions of books that are like just
Right.
rehashing a lot of the stuff. It was
Right.
truly
There was no
trial and error.
Instagram.
Yeah.
You got
No
it.
Instagram,
No
none of that.
Instagram, no Twitter. Like I said, YouTube had maybe 100 plus members on it. So, people were even afraid to even get a YouTube channel at that time. So we've come a long way.
Oh
Come a
yeah.
long way.
So how did you make that switch from cold process? Because many people use a pre-made base for melt and pour. So what made you transition to say, I want to make my own base?
Well, after I taught myself how to make the soap, I went to lotion. And then on Kathy Miller's site, they started talking about glycerin or transparent soap. And so I
Okay.
said, oh, I want to find out about that. So I'd probably been making soap maybe 5 or 6 months. And they called for a double boiler and you could try to make glycerin soap, transparent melt and pour soap base. And so I tried it and mine actually crystallized. I remember it specifically. It was green because I used spearmint fragrance oil in it. And it actually crystallized because I didn't have a double boiler, but I had 2 pots that fit inside of each other. I tried. And
Yeah.
so I put that away for 12 years, actually. I couldn't. I could do everything else but make glycerin soap.
So you
And
stepped away
so
for 12 years.
I put it away for 12 years. I was
Wow.
disgusted with myself. Like, I cannot get this. It's supposed to be translucent. It is not supposed to feel like hard crystals,
Mm-hmm.
But it was so funny. And I did use the soap, but it wasn't what it is today. And so probably the last 2 years, if you tell me that I can't do something, I'm going to work really hard to prove you wrong.
Right. Right.
And so again, I picked up this, okay, I'm going to try to make glycerin soap and fail. Shoot, okay, I'm going to wait a year. Okay, I'm going to try to make glycerin soap. okay, it's clear. Okay, it's looking good, but ew, it's getting goopy, and now it's like dripping onto other stuff. That was nasty. And because I was looking at other videos, and this lady was saying, oh, you could take cold processed soap, melt it down, and then add a whole bunch of glycerin to it. Oh, well, I tried that.
Okay. I'm
And,
just imagining it didn't turn out well.
ugh.
A goobly gobbly mess is
And
probably.
well, actually, it molded beautifully,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to wrap it right away. And because it was at least 50 to 70% glycerin, it's going to end up a gloppy mess.
Okay. So that
And
didn't
so I
work
said,
out.
all right. So you got to do something better. And for whatever reason, now the last, I want to say 18 months, I just can't pull myself away from having to get this right.
Yeah.
And so one day it just clicked.
And you got it. All of that trial and error.
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So
got it.
what would you say were some of your early challenges and how did you overcome them? And I think you started to talk about that with the resources that just weren't out there. That may be one of
Right.
them.
Right.
But is there anything else?
Perseverance is number one.
Okay.
You cannot give up when you want to teach yourself something. You have to do your research. You have to research ingredients. You have to make it. You
Mm-hmm.
can't let somebody just hold your hand and say, okay, you can do this. Okay, you can do that. It's just like baking or cooking. I can make a cake standing right beside you, and it has been my experience that your cake is going to taste slightly different.
Yeah. Very true.
Okay. And so I can watch a million videos, but it doesn't mean that the steps that you make or that you take in your video, if I take those same steps, human error is going to occur.
Right. You've got to try it is what you're saying.
You have to try it. So error. You have to persevere if you really want to succeed, and you have to be willing to fail.
Yeah.
Because my experience is in those failures is when you learn something new.
Absolutely. Very true. And so looking back to when you first got started, what do you think is there anything you would have done differently? Or what are you glad that you did do?
I would not have stopped, because in the process of me starting from the beginning in 2004, marriage failed in the end of 2005.
Okay.
And I had to stop being a stay-at-home mom and get a day job, And so at that time, the depression, sadness and everything. And it took me probably 2.5, 3 years to come back to make another batch of soap.
Okay.
So as far as going through trials and errors, just hold on to your happiness, hold on to your joy and the reason why you do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Even through your sadness, once you've worked through all of that, get back to work.
Get back to work. And so
that's my best. Yeah, get back to work.
And so my flip question of that is, what are you glad about what you did?
I didn't give up.
Didn't give up. So it's just the flip side of it. I love that. I love that.
I didn't give up. I persevered. And I will say this, not to go into my personal business, but I've already said I was married and marriage failed the end of 2005. In 2012, for a visit to visit our daughter, he realized that I didn't give up. And he said, I cannot believe that you still do it. I said, yeah. And he said, that's so awesome. So that was one of the biggest compliments, is that he realized that it wasn't just a momentary, thing or a passionless thing. I didn't give up, and I won't stop.
That's incredible.
So don't give up.
Well, you can't use that one for the next one, but I think that's going to be like the perfect answer for this next question. But what one piece of advice, what one piece of advice do you have for people interested in making their own glycerin soap base from scratch?
Do your research first.
Research first.
Make sure that you have experience at making hot processed soap base.
Mm-hmm.
And then be willing to fail.
Okay. And if they don't have a recipe, what I know you have recipes available, where could they go and get, because your recipes are tried and true, come from years
Right.
and years of, as you have told us, where I didn't do it right, I got it right. So where could they go and get your recipes if they just want to start with something and then try and build up from there?
If you want to start with my recipes, I do have some free recipes on my Facebook or within the Facebook group that I have. And once you get your hand on those and you work with those and go through the process and the motion of making those, and you see how the base reacts and the oils react and the solvents react and the differences in the ingredients you're using and how they're going to react in your hot process method, then you can go to my website at arseniablue.com. And if you are ready to really get serious about making your own base, then I have a variety of recipes that you have the opportunity to purchase.
Yeah.
From clear, transparent soap to actual melt and pour soap base, because there's the difference in the two is only one ingredient, and that ingredient is usually propylene glycol. So I would say melt and pour soap has propylene glycol in it. Transparent or translucent soap base does not. So
Now,
I give people the choice of the solvents they use.
So it's the
And
solvent.
you get them on our, and you can find them on arseniablue.com. You can also make it vegan or non-vegan.
Okay.
You know, so whenever you're looking at my recipes, I always will give you a base recipe, but let's say I use palm oil. You might have somebody like, for instance, from India, they don't want to use palm oil. Okay. And so they'll ask me for, where do I get an alternative? And so I'll share what an alternative is. Or maybe they don't want to use lard, which is pig tallow, because they're vegan. And so, you can go with coconut oil or a type of butters. But I always give people the option of their interchangeable ingredients, including their solvents.
Nice. And you also mentioned your Facebook group. What is the exact name of your Facebook group for people who want to join and try and figure out what is this? I can actually make it from scratch?
Okay, so I just changed the name of that Facebook group.
I believe
so I'm going to actually pull it up right now. It's called Glycerin Soap Base Makers.
Base Makers. Okay, guys. So if you are interested in learning, because a lot of people, when they decide, oh, I want to use melt and pour, they go out, and the problem with that is you don't control the ingredients. And a lot of reasons why people got started with making soap is they want to control the ingredients. And so once they get past that stage where they understand how to do the melt and pour, then they go into either cold process or hot process, but they still want that flexibility of melt and pour. I think that's where your group really comes in, because that can help them to continue on that journey of soap making. But like you said, they have to have that experience in making hot process soap first, because you can't just jump without understanding that part.
Right, because if you jump into it without understanding the ingredients and the process, you're going to lose a whole lot of money. Because you're going to mess up a whole lot of batches.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think many of us want to waste that hard-earned money trying to make something that, if we would have taken just a few more hours to watch another video and do a little bit more research, you know what I mean? I would have been able to identify that this is getting ready to volcano on me and how to control that, you know? And so definitely don't just jump in. Most people will tell you that melt and pour soap making or glycerin base making is an advanced soap maker technique.
Oh, yeah.
Because you
Absolutely.
really don't just want to jump off the cuff and say, oh, I'm going to make soap today. And boom, I'm making melt and pour soap base. It's, took me 12 years. And
But
I was
it's
pretty good by the time I had been making soap for, 5 months.
yeah.
I was pretty good. And I can't say, or should I say, I can honestly say that I felt as good making cold processed soap in 5 months that I have now 14 and a half years later.
Wow.
Once cold process, you just know it. But I burned myself, and I had volcano, and I had gel rings and all kinds of stuff happening before I really could identify what's getting ready to happen to troubleshoot it.
Okay.
And with melt and pour or glycerin or translucent, transparent, whatever you want to call it, it's really all the same thing. You want to make sure that you can troubleshoot your own soap base.
Okay. That's a great piece of advice there. It's not just watching the pot, but understanding what it is that you're seeing in that pot and being able to act accordingly. That is excellent, excellent advice. So your support community for glycerin soap base makers, I want to get that right. So people, because they're going to type it in like, I can't find it. Okay, it's glycerin soap base makers.
Yes.
Can you tell people a little bit about that community and what it is that you envisioned when you started that community?
I started this group to be rebellious because making my transparent soap without propylene glycol, which makes it melt and pour, I got kicked out of another base makers group because I posted that soap and it was clear. And I said, this is not melt and pour. This is transparent, natural soap. And they're like, well, this is a melt and pour base makers group, and you cannot remelt transparent or translucent soap. And I said, yes, you can. And I showed it to them, and I got blocked.
No. Okay, so maybe this will help me because I'm sitting here shaking my head, nodding. Is there a difference between translucent and melt and pour? Or is it just semantics?
It's ingredient. It's propylene glycol. It's that propylene glycol. Because people are under the impression, first of all, that melt and pour is not real soap, but that's not true.
No.
It's actually hot processed soap. And I used to feel that way until I learned, after that 5 months or whatever, that, oh, you can make this stuff,
Yeah.
And then now through the years to get more understanding, it really boils down to the point of understanding what it takes to make this stuff. Once you understand that, nobody will be able to say that's not real soap. And so when I began to realize that glycerin soap is melt and pour soap, is translucent soap, the whole base of it is hot processed soap. When you go through the process of making melt and pour soap base, it all starts with that recipe that's hot processed soap. So at a certain point, if you were to omit all the other ingredients that make it become melt and pour, you would have created a hot processed soap base that now you're ready to put in a mold.
Right.
But you're going to continue the process, and you're going to add your solvent, and you're going to add your simple syrup solution. And those added ingredients is why people call it melt and pour, because it will get hard, and then you can take it and put it in your microwave or on your crock pot or on your stove, and you can re-melt it.
Wow.
But the rumor is that transparent or translucent soap won't do that because you don't have propylene glycol in there.
But you have shown that it can happen without propylene glycol. Well, there's a person that I follow and I connect with. She's not in the soaping space. She's in social media, internet marketing space. And she has a quote that I absolutely love. Innovators are always persecuted until there's a mass of people that actually get it and then latch onto it. And then that innovator in the beginning was saying, I told you all along and you wouldn't listen to me. But now you got 50 other people saying it. It's the same thing like what you were saying with YouTube. There were only, 100 to 200 people, so people stayed away from it. Now people are clamoring to get their YouTube channel. So it's the same thing. Whenever you're introducing something new, it's just, I'm not really sure if we want to go down that path, but absolutely. So
it's absolutely true. And I agree with that because one of my favorite news stations is NPR radio. Oh. And so just last week, there was an older gentleman who's got to be over 80 years old. And the scientists now were just saying that there is I guess some sort of a gas or something that comes off of the sun. And that he said that the sun, actually, you can hear the noise from this gas come off of the sun. And he said 50 years ago, they called him a absolute crazy man or a crackpot scientist.
Wow.
They did not believe him, did not believe him, did not believe him. And so then they asked him about what had just popped up on the news last week, and somebody was able to get that sound and show it visually. And he said, well, they called me crazy then. He said, but I believed it then, and now you've proved it. And he said, and they're all dead now, and I'm still here.
Listening to that sound.
Yeah, exactly.
Listening to the sound.
So it's just crazy that you can't let the chatter stop you from pushing the envelope to not necessarily prove them wrong, but prove yourself right.
Exactly. And I think that goes back to the question of that's another piece of advice for new people. Like if you listen to the advice, depending on which book you pick up or which video you watch or your first experience with soap making, somebody may tell you, oh, you can't soap beyond room temperature, or you have to soap at 120 degrees or 130 or whatever. And until you try it, you won't know for yourself.
Absolutely.
And so that perseverance, I think that sums up your entire piece of it, Miss Cleo. So I do have one last question that I want to ask you. What's next? What else can we look forward to seeing from you? Not giving away the secret.
You shouldn't have asked me that. You should have asked me that. What's next for me is actually to buy my first house all by myself.
Awesome.
And I'm going to do it with soap bubble money.
There you go.
So I always tell my baby, she wants to go to Harvard University. And I said, my bubbles are going to put you there and pay your way through that. And so I'm going to buy my first house, my first home, and I don't want to use my money from corporate America. I want to use what I make with my hands.
Right. Incredible.
So that's next for me.
And I heard someone say that you had some blessed hands, and I agree. So I believe that you will definitely get that done. So number one, thank you so much for agreeing I have a page full of notes. That's going to be the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to